in all Russia territory. And the path of Кружок movement participants, it's the first step. It's an introduction in technology, and now it works national technology contest, and it's our main product, and it's a field when the young student in the school can find yourself in the technology world. In this contest, he make choose artificial intelligence or biotechnologies or information technology system, and start his or her development in this field. And he starts his or her digital portfolio during its contacts. And after that, they have opportunity to go to the project schools or find mentoring programs for themselves. And after that, in the universities and after universities, they in the position when they can make their own project and go to the acceleration of this project. And now several participants of the Кружок movement who are grown up but by our system, creating their own technology startups, and it's our honor and our hope too. Yes, and the agency is a very practical question for us, because between our activities of Кружок movement in the different steps, we are finding questions about agency, about responsibility, about self-determination of young people. And the first of all, for the question of agency for us, it's a development interesting in technology among school children and students. It's awareness of how technological development affects the world, because everyone understands that it's make different development to the different system, social system, and to the nature too. It's a responsibility for technologies. They have been developed and implemented, and it's influenced in the startups, in the corporation, in the all level. And understanding the interplay of the personal, societal, and planetary levels, that everything is influence to each other, and we have responsibility to each level of of our life, the society, and the planet too. And for young children, their agency, it's about professional self-determination. It's about choosing education path and finding new technological solutions for in the other living. It's an entrepreneurial approach and proactivity. It is a position of transformer of the world, and in the position of man who can changing to his life or her life in the system too. Yes, and now the short agenda. Now we're starting, and after that it will be the first part of our round table about what agency of adolescence is, and which adolescence way of seeing agency within education or outside of the education. Speakers presentation here. After that it will be part for questions, and the second part it's about new formats of school, the school of future, how we can build it, and which social system we can change to make the formation of agency is the reality, and to start the formation of agency between all of the school way of children. Yes, and now I would like to introduce our speakers. The first speaker is Dr. Shirli Steiberg. She is a research professor of critical studies from University of Kалгари. She is an executive director of the Freier project, and she is an award winner for career education research. And the second expert is Yuri Gромыко, a professor of psychology from Moscow State University of Psychology and Pedagogy, director of the Schiffers Institute, and the laureate of the award of the government of the Russian Federation in the field of education. The third speaker is Dr. Steve Дженнаро, professor of York University and the author of the books Selling Yes and co-editor of Yes and Social Media book. Fourth speaker is Pavел Lukša, professor of practice at the Moscow School of Management, co-founder of Global Educational Future, and the author of the Rapid Foresight methodology. And the fifth expert is Anдрей Андрусов, deputy director of Soul Center, expert in the field of child entrepreneurship, founder of the Easy Bees Club for startups. And now I open and our hosts, Alexei Fedosеев, the president of the Кружок movement, and Андрей Андрюшков, scientific director of the infrastructure center of Кружок movement. Now, Shirley, let's start our round table.
So you want me to speak first, Anna?
Yes. And now let's start our first part about what is edu-sense formation is, and what do you think about the environment, how this agency can build, and what do you think about education sphere, or it can build besides of education?
Well, it's good morning for me, but good evening to a lot of you. I do apologize that my background is backwards. I know it is, but I can't reverse it. So at least it's the right color. I really appreciate, Anna, you and your network and organization reaching out to me to participate. It's interesting, but there's not a lot of roundtables or conferences that are devoted to creating agency and empowerment for youth. Indeed, in my experience as in education, in schools, and observing teachers, most of the discussions about youth are how to control them, how to indoctrinate them, how to tell them how to live, how to act, and to remind them that they're probably not as good as their parents and grandparents were before them. And so a lot of my work has been in my critique of how youth are not valued in what I see is in North America as much as they are in possibly other countries. And so my concern in exactly creating agency is to first facilitate the importance of agency and self-determination in our children and youth. And I think in my work, I define youth as from about 10 to 25 years old because of physical changes in boys and girls and different ways the world is. Children have become youth or adolescents much quicker than they were in the times of our parents or grandparents. And indeed, youth comes very quickly and kind of surprises parents at times. My largest concern about this is the difference between teaching and mentoring. And I believe that teaching is an act of relating subjects or topics for children and youth to absorb and to learn. Pedagogy is a little different because pedagogy implies a knowledge of how to exchange ways of knowing between youth and teachers or mentors. And I like the mentorship model much better. I feel like teaching is a very top-down preaching kind of way of speaking, whereas mentoring and assisting, supporting becomes a much more active, live way of working with youth and ensuring that they understand that we see them as valuable human beings. And absolutely, in our society now, we are seeing youth do work and activist work at ages of as low as 9, 10, 15 years old. There has been tremendous youth movements in different countries, and often in reaction to something horrible or terrifying. Certainly in North America, we have some of our largest youth activism is when something has happened. For instance, a school shooting where 25 children and teachers are killed, and the youth are marching in North America to not have guns so available. Activism in stating that they do not feel like they're learning or being taught what should be taught. Certainly activism for the understanding of climate change, demanding that science classes provide more information so they can understand climate and actively work for good climates. So I am seeing a change by the youth in a lot of ways. I would say in North America, I am not seeing the change in teachers or pedagogues pushing for youth to be more active. Now, there could be a lot of reasons for that. One is that in especially the United States, in a country which has lawsuits and teachers getting fired if they do things that are what considered inappropriate, there's a lot of fear that people will lose their job. So there isn't the freedom. Certainly in Canada, there's a bit more freedom where people are able to be active and state what they believe is or isn't correct in how the world is. But what I am seeing as far as what worries me is that I do not see, especially, and I'll just speak to North American education, I do not see a desire for global ways of knowing, a created citizenship throughout the world where youth are able to connect and understand how other youth are reacting and acting and activating. And I think that that's something that I would like to see more of, as a lot of organizations like your own organizations. I work in an organization for entrepreneurship, but that there could be some sort of global coalition of allowing youth to listen to each other, to respect one another, and to globally be aware of one another, so that activism is not just local, but can be national and global as well. I think that there's certain things that aren't done that I would like to see done, and that would be an understanding that in teaching, that prescribed curriculum and state or national mandated curriculum is not a way to teach and work with youth. That the understanding that each youth, each child has their own needs and ways of knowing. And that's another thing, understanding that not all people learn the same, not all people absorb information the same. And I believe that has always been a problem in standardized education. I would like to see this idea of global youth that look at social justice and good work and actively participating in society. And one which demands, where the youth demand that they are listened to by adults, that they are respected and that they are not minimized, that their thoughts and ways of being are not just trivialized as it's a stage, or it's a way that kids are, but once you grow up, you're going to be another way. And so I would like to see a reconceptualization of ways of understanding adolescent behavior and growth, and not a consistent kind of Piagetian approach that all kids do a certain thing, all youth do a certain thing. They're in this puberty stage, they're in this post-puberty stage, they're in this pre-adult stage. I would like to see an understanding that stage theory can be very, very flexible, and that different youth fall into different categories, which then again means that we're creating a respect and an understanding of youth as entities that can make a difference, not just problematic young adults. I don't like the phrase in English, young adult. I don't want to see a 17-year-old be a young adult. I want to see a 17-year-old be a 17-year-old, a youth, an adolescent. I don't believe that they're adults in training. I believe that youth is a set of years or times that is not being looked at as a distinct entity. We even have early childhood in most countries, where we're discussing from birth to maybe 3 years old, and then we go into childhood. But then all of a sudden, the adolescent stage gets very often psychologized in a lot of ways, and expectations are made, and we don't consider the involvement of creating youth as part of our world. Indeed, there's youth at this point, and I think Greta and her discussions about climate change are just an example of thousands and thousands of global youth that have similar things to say. That there certainly have been small differences made by Gretas all over the world, but it's one young person is not enough as a spokesperson, but that there is kind of a social change, that we look at youth as part of society and as decision makers, and that we absorb ourselves and understand that teaching is just delivering information, that we need to be mentors and lead young leaders and create a different participation. So to create agency, in my opinion, is something that is shared, and it needs to be shared with youth and not just dictated on how it's going to be. So I hope that was clear and an okay introduction to what we're having a conversation about.
Shirley, thank you very much. Yuri Gromyko. Your microphone is off.
Hey, dear colleagues, friends, also students. First of all, allow me to express my appreciation for invitation to participate in this interesting conference that is organized by Kruzhok movement. After Shirley, it would be very different position, not so connected with activism, so to say, from position of even maybe Soviet school, which for my opinion was maybe the best in the world, but just now it is destroyed. And also from Vygotsky tradition. For my opinion, adolescence, boyhood and girlhood is actually the most revolutionary period in life of every person. This is clear somehow when she is situated in very delimited, oppressed position, in the situation of extremity, and is eager to change this situation. But the same is true for every person, because teenager is trying to find a point of intersection between himself, herself, and society, to come into a contact as the personal entity with community, to match himself, herself against society in serious way. And his friends, family members, his friends, family members, adults, but also communities as a whole. And this is not simply adaptation to existing society and its institutions, but also endeavors to introduce some ideas of changes or feeling. for the nearest community and society as a whole. But this revolutionary mood of teenagers was stolen and used by transnational corporations. Marketing departments of different corporations and fashion industries began to work with this 40, 50 years ago. Not schools and families as before anymore, but marketing departments began to produce lifestyle for teenagers because teenagers are very important audience of mass advertising in fashion industry, but also rich aging people who want to simulate teenager behavior, to be mischievous like teenagers, to demonstrate impish behavior in consumption by help of teenager-like clothes, appearance, pretty knickknacks. Actually, teenager can find himself, herself, needed type of interaction with societal milieu. She has not enough experience and knowledge to do this. And also it's very difficult because there are quick changes, huge shifts in society. And so she needs assistance in her conflicts with society, confused encounters with it. Fyodor Dostoevsky, famous Russian writer, in his novel, The Adolescent, there are different translations of this novel in English, also translated as raw youth or an accidental family. In this novel, he, in very deep way, reconstructed some states of mind of teenager. And also the protagonist of this novel, Arkady Dolgorukiy, is older than a usual teenager today. Some of his ideas, for example, to become a Rothschild, fabulously wealthy someone, is rather similar to ideas of modern Russian teenagers that would like to become oligarchs or mogul incorporation in a crack. I would like to speak not about all groups of teenagers. It's impossible. It's extremely differentiated theme. I don't touch in this my short presentation teenagers from oppressed group, from broken families, or children with special needs. And not also the second group, teenagers that are targeted as gifted and selected through specially organized contests as main venue to cream off the best pupils. I first of all would like to speak about, so to say, backbone, middle teenager group. Teenagers in this group are also very different, of course, with different profiles and also amalgama somehow. In this group, there are many other groups, but they are not members of extreme sides. Teenagers as criminals, socially alienated teenagers, or in opposite, gifted teenagers. Because in the existing educational system, if teenager is not winner of specially organized contests and not labeled as gifted with diploma, she is declared very often to be just crap. And this is very bad. The position of cultural historical psychology, Vygotsky approach to adolescence, and position of Vygotsky followers emphasize the meaning for child development of the special concept, the leading type of activity. A development of child, teenager, young person depends on the leading type of activity in this specific age period. There are different anthropological life epochs. For example, a teenager continues to go to school to study various disciplines, but learning activity is not leading type of activity anymore because motives and general vital interests are not connected anymore with the learning activity. Playing behavior was leading type of activity in the kindergarten. Learning activity was leading type of activity in primary school, but not anymore in the middle school. And my teacher in psychology, Vasily Davidov, argued that the type of leading activity was tremendously important to pedagogy of teenagers because new abilities, new consciousness structures, new deep understanding, new forms of self-determinations are formed when teenager is mastering her behavior in the leading type of activity. But unfortunately, this leading type of activity for teenagers is not institutionalized in modern society. And so it's not exactly clear what it should be. And there are different hypotheses, different candidates for the role of leading activity type for adolescents. Some psychologists propose intimate personalized interactions as the leading activity in this period of life because teenagers are deeply moved by their interior experience, gender questions, but also experience of real friendship, philia, and possibility to share their thinking, emotions, deep thoughts, opinions with peers, not with adults, not with parents, for example. That is why so many teenagers begin in this period life to write poems and are interested in poetry in general. But then suddenly and abruptly stop this pastime, give up, and even never do this anymore. This happens because deep emotional and cognitive drives and needs were satiated and exhausted. There is also another candidate for role of leading activity for teenagers. This is design activity, project undertaking, different kinds of project, not only engineering and technological projects. But this type of activity is not socially institutionalized, yet as the leading type of activity for teenagers. It means that special pedagogy and methodology is absent today to work with teenagers with their specific problems to assist them in their conflict situation. Moreover, the model of school that we have just now in our society is not oriented to help teenagers in their socializations. And teenagers needed specific socialization, not so much adaptive one, but different kind of socializations that is connected with the transformation of society. And teenagers are eager to have such experience, to design and to implement social changes, and through this to understand how society functions. And this is a good idea because adaptation to existing rules and regulations of societal institutions is only facade, superficial appearance of social life, and not mechanisms of its organization. For some reason, design activity is a very good candidate for leading activity of teenagers, but not as classroom interaction and exercises, but as real life exploration and discoveries in the frame of broad anthropological perspective. According to broad anthropological perspectives, teenagers, young people in traditional society, for example, come through the special rites of initiation with organized pertinent procedures to become full-fledged and mature member of adult society. And design activity, elaboration of project, must be organized according to this anthropological perspective to structure special place for teenagers of entertainment or tryouts with society. So we must have special institutional places for such tryouts. But school today is not proper place for such organization because modern Russian state school is biased by uniform state exam that was elaborated using as lodestar the American test system that also deformed American secondary school. For discussion, I propose the best book about this, for my opinion, The Big Test, The Secret History of American Meritocracy, author Nicholas Lemon. From reading this book, you can see that all critical points of American test system are reproduced in Russian uniform state exam that is organized as a choice of the right answer in multi-choice question form. So why the moniker for uniform state exam is the guessing game. Uniform state exam is the plague of Russian educational system, and approximately every politician today stressed necessity to change this framework, but nothing is done. That is why Kruzhok movement activities are so important, for my opinion. Kruzhok movement introduced special technological competitions that allow some graduates to come away from this obligatory procedure and to find different track to universities, not exclusively through uniform state exam. But additional education and must not initiate and provoke deschooling. Yes, I would like to stress that senior classes of secondary school today as institution is not accommodated to processes of socialization and instruction in general. Pupils in 10th and 11th form in these classes do not have instruction and education anymore, but only preparation for uniform state exams, because of these exams are permissions to university. To change situation, we must do two things: to design new school institution and to change fundamental teacher education, to introduce proposal for different pedagogical education. Concerning the first point, we propose new model of the school with Mr. Rubtsov and Mr. Margulis. We elaborated and published the model of so-called the Russian School for the Future, which is must be very different from the existing school models, according to Vygotsky perspective. Because existing school is distorted by uniform state exam. Main idea is in senior classes of the school must be organized full-fledged design activity and research activity, because we must not forget about research activity. It is possible consistently to teach design activity and research activity in association and communities of participants in the school. And the subject of this design activity must be not only technological engineering problems, but also social problems, problems of self-determination. But, and this is very important, design activity and of course research activity, especially cultivated in the high school, must be not opposed to knowledge and school disciplines, literature, mathematics, physics, biology, and so on, but be integrated in coherent unity with them. And we specially elaborated instruments for such integration, so named meta-subject, such as problem, task, science, schemes, meaning, situation, knowledge. Because all these meta-subjects can be used and exist in the context of project elaboration and the teaching learning situation of school disciplines. But mastering meta-subject as integration of design activity and knowledge depends on increase of consciousness level, what is named conscientization by Freire's, or increase of awareness and reflection, also awareness of me by teenager and his team as her team as subject. Teacher and student both needed conscientization to master knowledge and self-determination in design situation. But the second problem is much more important. It is necessary to change basic teaching activity and teachers' education. But I hope I'll give some words about this in the second part of our roundtable. Thank you so much for your attention.
Yuri, thank you very much. You said that you will have different approach to like Shirli, but I think it's a big quantity of valuable, the same valuable base of your thoughts. And it's very interesting to discuss it about after presentations. Now I give the floor to Steve Jennaro.
Hello, and thank you. Thank you for inviting me to speak today. And two incredible people already have spoken. lots of great ideas to consider. I want to take a look for a moment at the language of the main question that's posed here. When the words that we're discussing here in particular is agency and adolescent, as two key words that come to the forefront. In my work in children's rights, as an activist in children's rights, we explore these terms as politicized terms, right? They are words that have deep meaning in the lives of young people and how they get to live, and what roles they get to play in the society around them. Agency, for example, if we look at that term from a rights-based approach, what that term means is to have agency is to be able to participate in the decision-making process when those decisions directly impact your life. And when I say a rights-based approach, what I'm speaking about is the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, which was drafted in 1989 and has since been signed by 196 countries around the world and ratified, actually, which means made into law, agreed to be placed into law by home countries, by every country in the world, with the exception of the United States. So we have an international agreement about the basic human rights of children or young people, because the UNCRC, the Convention of the Rights of the Child, refers to everyone under the age of 18. Okay, so it's consistent with most psychology definitions of what is an adolescent. So we have a basic fundamental agreement globally about what are the human rights of young people or adolescent. And so a rights-based approach means we want to look at the experiences of our young people through this lens, through the lens of the UNCRC. And when I say the experiences, I mean not only their lived experiences and practices, but the rules or spaces that govern their lives. Like, for example, education, which is a major space in young people's lives. So if we take a rights-based approach and we look at the UNCRC, and we take a look at this notion of agency, so to be able to participate in the decision-making process when those decisions directly impact your own life, we see that there are 56 articles in the UNCRC, 56, and they're divided into 3 types of categories: protection rights, provision rights, and participation rights. And agency overlaps all of those, but really agency is about the participation component. What's interesting is at the very beginning of the Convention of the Rights of the Child, article number 3, we refer to as the best interest principle. And this one, I think, speaks directly to the notion of agency. In the best interest principle, it states that children should be able to make decisions in their own lives when possible. And so obviously what this refers to is a ladder of participation, where each rung on the ladder, as children get older, have more life experience, they become more capable to make decisions in different areas or arenas of their life, they are able to make more decisions. It's a ladder of participation. So always giving participation, always offering more opportunities for participation or agency to share in the decision-making process. But fundamentally, in all realms of their life, young people should be able to make decisions that directly impact their own lives. However, when they cannot, and adults make decisions with children or for children, they should always do so in the best interest of the child. And this refers to specifically education, healthcare, medical, law, legal, social welfare, social programs, government. So when we are making decisions for young people, we should be thinking about making decisions with young people. This is that participation component, okay? But young people themselves should be able to be active participants in the discussions for these decisions to be made. This is what agency means. It means fundamentally having a seat at the table of discussion, being able to have an opinion, being able to share your opinion, and being able to have your opinion heard and be valued in those discussions. When we are looking at the lives of young people globally, we recognize that they occupy largely 3 types of spaces. Now, this is drawing on political theory, but the first space is the primary space. The primary space for young people is within the home. This is the first space of contact where they learn most at the earliest age about the world around them, about what the roles are for them in the world around them, what the opportunities are for the world around them, and they are under the most direct surveillance in this space of, parents, guardians, grandparents, whoever it may be. The secondary space in the lives of young people is school. So outside of home, when they leave the home, they go to school. This is a secondary space, occupies a very large role in socialization, again, displaying for young people what are the social cultural norms and expectations. And when I say social cultural norms and expectations, largely for children or for young people, for adolescents, what I'm talking about here is the hopes, the goals, the dreams, the expectations, and the fears of adults about the roles that young people can and cannot play in the society around them. So you have the primary space, which is the home. You have the secondary space, which is the school. And those spaces are largely adult-dominated spaces, which means adults make the decisions within those spaces as to, again, what young people can and cannot do, where they can and cannot go, what they can and cannot say. The decisions are largely made by adults. But a rights-based approach, one that has a sense of agency for young people, is one where young people get to participate in the decision-making processes. They get to share their opinions and values in these spaces. What we know from political theory is there is also third spaces, liminal spaces that exist on the margin of the periphery, For young people, these exist outside the direct surveillance of adults, outside the direct supervision of adults. When I was a child, the third space was the park or the ravine or the forest or the woods. I would get on my bicycle, I would ride, I would go and meet with my friends, and we would play. Okay, so third spaces, liminal spaces are often opportunities for play. And by play here, I don't necessarily mean just game playing, but play occupies a very important learning role in the lives of young people and their psychological development. It's also about agency in play is very important, because play is where young people make sense of their role in the world around them. They take the social norms and expectations that are expressed to them in primary spaces like home, in secondary spaces like school, through mainstream media as well. They take those social expectations and norms, and then what they do is they work them out through play, sometimes by replicating dominant ideas, and sometimes by subversively using play to challenge those ideas. So within third spaces, what we have are opportunities for play, opportunities for conversation, for discussion, and for making sense and understanding the world around us. When it comes to young people in third spaces today, largely these third spaces have taken on an important role using tools like social media or technology, where young people gather in these exterior spaces outside of the primary or the secondary, and they share and communicate with each other. It's an opportunity for young people to perform agency, especially in areas when they are being denied in primary or secondary spaces. If they cannot speak at home freely, if they cannot share their ideas or play within the education system to make sense of the world around them, then where do they gather? Where do they meet? How do they communicate? How do they express that agency? Often that happens in third spaces, and these third spaces, like I said, can be technological. Certainly social media has demonstrated the value of this. People like Greta Thunberg in 2019 organized the school strike for climate change, where around the world, young people using the hashtag school strike for climate change organized walkouts of going to school. And in Australia, where I was living, and in Canada, where I was teaching, and around the world, thousands of young people skipped school, walked out, went to their local governments, and marched to protest. So they're using social media as an opportunity to organize, to communicate, to play, to speak back to dominant norms or structures that are either oppressive or that are preventing opportunity for participation. And in doing so, they are working to activate their agency. Again, agency is about having the opportunity to participate in the decision-making process. And when that opportunity is denied to young people in primary and secondary spaces, they have an obligation to seek that out elsewhere. And they do. And historically, they have, not just this generation with technology, but previous generations as well, not just in North America or in Canada where I live, but also around the world. And so this is an important thing to consider. The last thing I want to say on this, again, is about the politicization of these words. These are very political words like adolescent and agency, and in particular about this notion of the formation of agency. Because from a philosophical standpoint, agency exists for all individuals. So it is not something that we have that we get to choose to give or to take away. Again, one of the previous speakers mentioned Paulo Freire, and it's the same notion around Freire's discussion about liberation. Liberation is not something that we give to others, right? Individuals activate their own sense of consciousness. It's something to be activated by the individual. All individuals have agency. They all have subjectivity. Otherwise, the world is simply dictated to us, and we just accept it. What happens, though, is in many spaces, for political reasons, either in primary, secondary spaces, through institutions, social organizations, whatever it may be, often what happens is the agency of the individual is denied, especially for children, especially for young people. And they are told to participate only one way, to learn only one way, to engage only one way, and they are prevented from having other opportunities to share in the discussion. So what we can do in the education system, if we want to have a more just society and a more just education system is continue to create opportunities like the ones discussed by the previous speaker, which were very good. Okay, we can continue to create opportunities to allow individuals to activate their sense of agency as full participants. But agency is not something that we give, because to do that would remove the subjectivity of the individual. It would objectify them. It would take them away from being a subject, and instead it would make them an object. And young people are not objects to be studied. They are not stagnant. They do not lack humanity. They are full beings, exactly as they are now. They will become adults, yes, that is true, but they are full human beings as they are right now. And one of the real problems around the rights of young people, so going back to where I started this whole discussion with a rights-based approach and agency, this is where I will close. One of the real problems with children's rights globally is so often the discussion of young people is that they are always in the process of becoming something else, but they actually are right now, full human beings right now. And when we think about young people as becoming something, as always being in the future, we deny their humanity at this moment right now. And in doing so, we remove the opportunity for them to have that full agency. So education can play a role in the training, the civic training of agency. It can provide additional tools to help activate that agency. Okay, but it can't give the agency to young people because the agency is already there. What we're looking for is improved opportunities for young people to participate in the decision-making process, especially when those decisions impact their lives directly. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. It was really very interesting and intense to hearing your position. Thank you very much. And after that, I pass the word to Pavел Lukša.
Thank you. And I want to begin by appreciating what Steve just said. Was actually one of my statements as well, that humans are natural agents at any age. There is no, like, I think we need to recognize that the current education system actually deprives human beings of agency, but the agency is always there. So the question is, how do we design a learning system that supports and continues to kind of empower human beings to remain agents, so to say, and to strengthen their ability to act in the world. And in that regard, I wanted to begin by contextualizing where I think why this conversation about learner agency is so important right now. From two perspectives. One perspective is that we are facing an increasingly complex and turbulent social reality that encourages us as human beings, personally and collectively, to become very creative and inventive in finding, let's say, new ways of organizing, new ways of being that would be appropriate for this stage of social evolution. The conversation about future skills or skills that are relevant for transforming economy, for transforming society, brings us to recognition that it is the responsibility of every human being to become the agent in this changing reality. There is no, let's say, the difference between the reality of industrialized economy, which was kind of the economy of large systems, so to say, social machines, was such that human beings were frequently deprived of their agency and were molded into being, so to say, cogs in this large social machine. But the present reality invites us to rediscover our ability to create, and actually invites us. It seems to be as the only way going forward to face the challenges that we are facing on multiple levels of our society, from, let's say, global challenges, the climate change, the biodiversity loss, increasing social injustice, and many other things, to, let's say, the very local reality of not inclusive forms of, let's say, social organization in our societies, not very efficient distribution of resources, lack of understanding of where to go on a local level, so to say. All of this invites human beings to become agents for the future. And as part of that, let's say, solution for this changing reality, the idea of learning ecosystem that would create opportunities for lifelong learning is increasingly recognized by educators. And the idea of learning ecosystems actually requires that every learner in the learning ecosystem becomes an agent. They cannot be fed, let's say, the content, they cannot be fed the learning pathway. They need to become, they need to take responsibility for their lifelong learning trajectory. And this is why cultivation of learner agency becomes crucial for let's say, for the success of societies, for the success of nations, and for our collective success as species in this very turbulent and sometimes very frightening reality. I think in regard to what has been discussed, I think we also need to recognize there are degrees of agency. That we should first of all look at agency as a natural trait of every human being, and as such we can as we learn to act in the world, we need to recognize that we learn to act in the context of, let's say, different social realities, beginning with our family. Is a child given voice in the family? Is the child able to act as an equal, let's say, member of the family, or as someone who is recognized as in a school, who has a voice in the school, who has some, let's say, ownership over the learning pathway, is someone who can demonstrate certain leadership in the process of learning, discovering new abilities. And further and further into, like, stepping into the world as adults, we continue to cultivate this agency. So it doesn't stop with adolescence. It's not like one trait that is kind of discovered or trained to us and then full stop. I think we are really continuing to embrace, to cultivate this ability to act, and to act with consideration of larger and larger and more diverse social contexts. And I think we need to recognize that as human beings, we continue to grow. We from the perspective of lifelong learning, I feel that it's important to recognize that these stages of development, they continue throughout the whole life. And we need to discover what are those next stages of agency that need to be cultivated after, let's say, we move from adolescence into adulthood. And of course, in terms of the design of what we call modern education, I think it's relatively outdated education already. The industrial school that, for example, Dr. Gромыко was talking a lot about the modern school and the school in Soviet Union. I think it's the general design of industrial school is very similar across the world. Like whether we look at Russia or Canada or Argentina or Germany, there are differences, but let's say some key elements are relatively the same. And the idea of, let's say, what Paulo Freire called the banking paradigm of the school, the idea that we kind of suppress the learner to plant ideas into learner from the more, let's say, superior position of a teacher, is really present in, I think, in literally any system, a school system in the world. And that type of school was needed in some regard for the industrial. It was demanded by the industrial society, by nation states, really kind of mold the citizens, the responsible workers, good soldiers. But nowadays, like I said, we need a different type of human being. We need someone who is empowered to change the world. And in that regard, we need a different model of education, the one that cultivates learner agency and gradually induces human beings into taking more and more responsibility in larger context, beginning with schools, but a kind of opening into the world. And of course, all methods that already were mentioned by colleagues present in the panel, such as play and game-based learning or project-based learning, they are very useful to support it. And also methods such as research-based learning or entrepreneurship that I think Anдрей Андрусов is going to talk about in a moment. And adults, as people who are organizing this learning space, are really they're playing crucial roles in two regards. They're, on one hand, they're playing their role as exactly as role models, as someone who is already empowered to be agent, to be a lifelong learner, to be a proactive person, and who demonstrates this ability, shows, to kind of empowers a young person by example. Also as a validator, someone who encourages to do the same. But also the second role, I feel, is something that is what we can call the hosting role, this providing the safe space for learners to step into that role as agents and to really act. And that role requires cultivation of a new type of leadership, the leadership where you can lead not by example, but someone who creates the condition, enabling condition, leading from behind. This is a new type of leadership that was not really cultivated in the industrial society, but is very needed in the present reality. And I quite agree, because of this kind of heritage that is constantly reproduced in the existing industrialized education system. It's very hard to expect that schools would lead the process of cultivating the learner agency. So this is why the role of complementary education, third spaces, is becoming so important, and that's why the work of Krужок movement and the likes is so crucial, because they can provide that learning opportunity. And I would like to add the notion of the fourth space, the space that exists in the virtual world, that is also relatively free from this, let's say, suppression mechanisms, and gives opportunities to learners to learn collectively in social media, in virtual worlds, in games, and many more spaces that provide empowering opportunities and action opportunities. I feel that this conversation is really important. We need to continue, and we need to look at different methods that help us cultivate learner agency, because this is, like I said, it is a cornerstone of the future learning reality and the future society. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I think that it will be another calls to the agency in the future, because the creation of metaverses and different new ideas to forming our reality, it's really very interesting to the influence in our life and to the adult sense too, of course. Thank you. Now I invite Anдрей Андрусов, the expert of child entrepreneurship.
Yes, thank you very much. I am really glad I'm here, and I hear this like people speak. Very important thing, and I want to move a little bit from the conceptual level here we have here to sort of practice, because my experience is just working with teenagers in school. That's what I do for the last like 6-7 years, and I help them develop their entrepreneurial projects, teach entrepreneurship. And for me, agency, as we discussed here, it has less of this political or philosophical meaning maybe, but more of practical thing, that I see agents in teenagers as their ability to set their own goals and reach them, and like do something to reach these goals. And yes, it is about making decisions relevant to them, but it is very rarely, on very day-to-day basis, it's very rarely political big decisions, and most of them, in like 90% of time, they are occupied with quite simple things, and this is where they behave as agents. And I see this, there is actually sometimes it's even opposite to what we want them to do. I mean, often it's opposite, but I mean, sometimes it's opposite to what we think they is in their interest. It's sort of destructive, and I still feel that this is their the way they act as agents. And this is very, I mean, in my daily work with kids, it's never activism, actually. It's never changing big things. It's just making what they really want. Maybe I would wish that they do more social entrepreneurship, because this is my main job is related also to impact investing and social entrepreneurship. And I'm very happy when kids, they create these projects in this area. They try to change the world. They talk a lot about this, but in their projects, they very quickly forget about all these big ideas, and they start doing very simple things, very far from all this social and environmental change. Maybe their limits, their level of activism is limited by their teacher, of course. And I think this is the important thing, that what kids do, how they express their agency is limited by the adults that are close to them. Actually, I will come back to this, because I think the adults they play a crucial role, and this is why, for example, their own discussions in social media is not. It is also their agency, like they do what they want, but in terms of creating conditions, environment to develop their agency, it's not always. It just doesn't always help. At least that's what I see. So I wanted to say that, like, everybody is agent, but not everyone is expressing it. Not everybody is behaving like that, and not everybody wants to take their responsibility for their decisions. So basically, they run from their freedom, and when they're smaller, we see less of this. But I see when they grow up, maybe these are the conditions of like Russian schools. Even though I work in with kids from several different schools, and I see this that like from age of 10 to 13 years old, I see quite a big difference in how they get restricted in their willingness to take responsibility, to act according to their needs, to act as agents. And this it very much depends on the adults they have near them. Important adults, like it can be school and it can be home. It can be the third places like Kruzhok. That it really, if there is no adult that can increase their, can raise their level of agency. I mean, I'm not talking about like forming, like pushing them, but it's just giving an example. The best thing the adults can do is just show by example how they behave, show that they can be agents of their life and of what happens around. So I think this is why it is very important to be to have these places, maybe third places, maybe it should be school. It can be in school, but very often, at least in like Russian regular school, I think in the world, it's pretty much the same. And like in regular school, it's very rare that kids find the right adult to help them mature and take responsibility and become agents. I think if we're talking about how the system can support agency, can support development, create this environment, yes, it's all about environment. It's not about like pushing, making them do something, of course, but it's like giving them an opportunity to choose, to have problems with more than one right answer. And the most important thing is to make this, to have real problems, because yes, kids want to play, of course, they want to play, but they don't like artificial games, like games that are not relevant to their life. That's why I believe in entrepreneurship, because it's like real life cases, real life relationship, and when they go in the real world and try to propose the product, this is how they get the feedback, and this is how they see the way the world works, and this is their product. I mean, this is a lot about themselves, about what they want. I think this helps a lot. And so if a school wants to create this environment, there should be a lot of choice. They should, kids, they need to have to try everything and choose what they want. Basically, I mean, that helps a lot. And of course, like real life problems, they offer this opportunity because they have all this variety of tools they can use. So coming back to the importance of person, and like whether it can be school or somewhere out of school, even in the schools, I think I will quote here Ken Robinson. I was at his lecture once, and it really impressed me. He said that inside a school, the system, he said, no, don't tell me about the system that doesn't allow you to develop the right environment in your school. Because the education system within a school is the principal of the school, and within a class is the teacher in the class. So basically, I have seen within the same system, I have seen absolutely fantastic classes with outstanding teachers, absolutely fantastic schools with outstanding principals of the schools. So then the question is, where do we find the right people, the right teachers and right principals, and all these adults that will create the environment we need to help kids become agents. Thank you.
Andrei, thank you. Yes, now we have a part for questions, and I invite participants of our roundtable turn on the microphone and ask questions. Now we have one question in the chat. It's a question for Steve about. It's a question: what is the criteria when young people is considered as able to make a decision?
Well, I think that it depends on what the decision itself is, right? So we talk about, in children's rights, we talk about a ladder of participation. So we offer young people the opportunity to participate in the discussion and make decisions. And then as they express more experience and the depth of the decision increases. So for example, my 4-year-old wants to participate in the decision of what we're having for dinner. Okay, we can have a discussion and they can participate in that. But at 4 years old, they're probably not going to participate in the discussion of who's going to turn on the oven or the stove and cook the dinner themselves. But if we start having the discussions on the first rung of the ladder at 4 years old about what will be the dinner, then by the time they're 6 or 7, they can participate in chopping the vegetables and helping to make the dinner. And then by 10 or 11, they can be cooking the dinner. But if we don't give them the opportunity to participate in the discussion at 4 about what dinner is going to be, and we don't give them the opportunity to participate at the age 6 in chopping the vegetables, then the first time they go to cook at 10 years old or 11 years old and they make a mistake, adults quickly go, see, they can't do it, and then they remove the opportunity for participation. So what we have to do is, again, create a scenario where we start with small stakes and we give entry points for young people from a very young age, from the earliest possible time, to participate in decision-making processes. And then as the opportunity increases, as the age increases, as the experience increases, the range of decision-making also can increase. We shouldn't just start at 18 and say, okay, you're 18, now you can vote in who your government's going to be. Why are there not steps along the way previous to that for opportunities to participate? If we wait until the stakes are large, then the first time young people make a mistake, we quickly write them off. What I will say to this is 2 other things. First is, we don't use this same criteria with adults. When adults make poor decisions in electing their government, we don't remove their opportunity to participate in the next election. We don't say, oh, you elected Donald Trump as president. Now, 79 million of you don't get to vote in the next election. No, we don't use the same criteria. So why is that the criteria that we use on young people, on children? We say, oh, see, look, they made a bad decision, or, oh, they made a mistake. They can no longer participate. Human learning happens through mistakes. We make mistakes and we learn from those mistakes. That need to participate is extremely important. So we start with small stakes and then it grows. The final thing I'll say on this is I'll give you a large stake or a very important example of this again, human rights based in the legal system for children. So in the province of Ontario, the state that I live in Canada, when parents are being separated, okay, so they're getting a divorce, and there is a custody battle in the court. The child who the custody is about is assigned their own lawyer. The state assigns the child their own lawyer, separate from each of the individual parents' lawyers, because they recognize that the child has their own rights in this process and needs to be part of the decision-making process, separate from each of the adults. So regardless of the age of the child, if there is a custody battle, they are assigned their own lawyer. So again, going back to the very beginning, it's a ladder process. We should begin with small stakes, have as many entry points as possible, allow children to make mistakes, and do not hold those mistakes against them as a preventative measure from future opportunities to participate.
Thank you, Steve. It's a very interesting point, I think. Maybe somebody from speakers can some questions and or some opinion and other ideas.
Anna, I have not questions, but some commentaries, if it's possible. Юрий Громыко. Yeah?
Okay.
Okay. I thank very much Pavел Lukša because he can help me explicate my position. When I am speaking from the position of Soviet school, I am not speaking from industrial Fordist formation. For me, the most interesting initiative, how to teach every person thinking, to develop thought acts. What is exactly perspective, revolutionary very much, of Ilyenkov, Davidov, and so on. And from this point of view, for me, it's very important how to interconnect possibility to act, communication, possibility to express yourself, to foster your agency, to foster agency of the lessons, and simultaneously to think and to teach development of thought process, of thought acts. And from this perspective, for me, it's very clear that agency that, and every person, of course, I agree, every person has agency, but this is like chrysalis, yeah, before butterfly. It's like chrysalis. But the problem is how to фактически to foster development of this agency in real acts, in real possibility to communicate, and new thought process. Because the problem of decision making, what is level of decision making? Because through activism, it's also possible to steal possibility to thinking, so to say. So why, according to my Russian perspective, we have special concept of position, because it's necessary to take a position in communication, in acting field, or in thinking. And this is very important, because only through semiotics of position, through schematization on position, it's possible to understand what is exactly how agency is presented in this situation. Very often according to social rules, but very often against social rules. And so this is very important, because the main problem, how exactly we fostering thought process. Not in such way as usually in school people said, yes, but through mathematics, it's possible to teach thinking. It's not an indirect way in demonstrating that development of acts of thought is connected with action and possibility to have this or that position in this or that milieu. Because it's for me a very important problem, because if we because the problem is how to foster possibility of children of adolescent to be transformer of social society and social milieu. And this is connected with different things. This is connected, of course, with virtual reality, because it's also connected with social networking, because it's possible to demonstrate that every intelligent person, if it would be immersed in social networking, in TikTok, he began to be idiot very quickly. But from other side, social network could be used to organize social projects, to develop and to transform some social milieu. And also with virtual reality. Through virtual reality, it's possible to stimulate escapism, but it's possible really to create new ideas and new projects. And so from this position, to discuss agency, which is, so to say, every person, as it was said, has agency. The main problem, how to, through different steps, to develop new positions for person to be thinker, to be actor, to be communicator, and to interconnect position in thinking process, position in action, and position in communication. And to do this, from my point of view, the main revolution must be done, of course, with the education of teachers. Because teachers must have the possibility, for example, to organize not games, but meta games. And through these reflexive meta games, to demonstrate what traps are in usual activism, in usual rules, in usual possibilities to go according to rules, and simply to distract these rules and this social milieu. And for this, so this possibility to be organizer of meta games is tremendously important for social position. But first of all, and the most important thing, how to interconnect new possibilities of thinking with action, because this is a real pedagogy. Because if we would like to put teenager in position of societal transformer, he must interconnect thinking abilities, acting abilities, communicative abilities, and of course it must be done according to values and principles, yeah, and with new possibilities of leadership in such situation. But for me, the main trap which we possible have, if to steal a possibility to develop thinking process and new thoughts which must be connected with action. So this is the main problem, which is connected also with the necessity and possibility to develop new pedagogy and new education for teachers, which can not simply to be in bureaucratic milieu, yeah, but they must be able to construct communities, to construct around school new communities, and through this a live community to change the school as bureaucratic milieu. And this is tremendously important, because what is position of this community? Only through this positioning of community, it's possible to teach adolescent to what to do. Because, for example, very simple example, from UNESCO, I was asked to discuss the problem restoration of education system after Chechen war. And the main problem of restoration of education system was exactly connected how not simply to organize a bureaucratic institution in Chechnya, but how to begin to construct community of participants in distracted milieu, so to say. And from this point of view, it's tremendously important, of course, all problems. For example, climate change, because till now it's not clear. And there are in United Nations very good point of view and very good discussions whether this climate change is connected with anthropogenetic factors or not. And there are different visions of this. Of course, we have climate change, and it's necessary to organize energy transition. So, for my opinion, it's very important to understand how to have scaffolding, scaffolding in development of position as transformer of social society. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yuri, thank you. It's a good proposal from Shirley to limit an answer to a few minutes, because we have now 2 or 3 answers from the chat, and after that we can share your opinion and go to the part 2 of our roundtable. Alla, you were first. What is your question?
So I will lower my hand. Hi, everybody. Good to see you all. It's really a really interesting series of talks. Really a pleasure to be here. So Yuri Gромыко partially answered my question, because I was going to ask how the industrial model of education, in his opinion, related to the Soviet model. That was going to be a part of my question, because actually I thought that I wanted to kind of connect the 5 talks that we just heard together, and that was going to be a part of my question. So I thought that Pawel Lukša did a very good job kind of tying all the pieces together in his kind of outlining of the industrial model. And I wanted to continue this a little bit, because in my view, I work at a liberal arts college in New York State. And I see firsthand what he is describing. I mean, we're really seeing a change from the industrial model to the new model, which we can call the entrepreneurial model of education. And it's just everywhere. And I just want to point out that learners' agency is not a revolutionary term, is the new norm. Everybody's using it. So learners' agency, the entrepreneurial approach to education it's everywhere, is all over the place. I'll give you 2 examples. So for example, in the last week, I talked to the admissions at my school, where they talked about how we admit students. And for example, 2 things they said are becoming less and less important. It's grades. Grades are number 4 on the list of what we look at, and SAT scores. And this is back to what Yuri Gромyko talked about, sort In the Russian model, standardized testing is a new thing. In the American model, standardized testing is becoming less and less important. So it's number 5 on the list. Number 1 on the list is activity, student activity. Students are asked to talk about their activity, things they're involved in. We asked like, what kind of activities? They said being involved in things like basketball or, going to protests, Back to Shirley's talk, right? So basically protesting climate change. So basically activities paint a portrait of who the student is, right? Like who the student is, and them talking about it creates a narratological self. Basically telling a story about yourself is number 1 criterion of being admitted to a college. Number 2 is writing an essay about yourself. So the same thing. So activities and writing an essay, not the grades or the standardized testing. So here we have it, is the idea that a teenager in high school is a little entrepreneur. They're involved in activities and they're building themselves as basically out of those activities. And then they're talking about those activities and applying to prestigious universities. And those universities are evaluating what they've constructed. So it's completely extracurricular. It's not the subjects they're studying, it's not the grades they're earning. And this is the new model of education. So the second thing that we've discussed in the last 2 weeks is majors. Majors are considered outdated. We're phasing them out. We've been talking more and more about pathways through the majors. So basically, we're looking at how students are supposed to create pathways, their own individual pathways through the different majors that we have. So again, students are agents of their own education. We as professors, we're helping them create pathways through the gradually outmoded, outdated majors that we have. So majors are kind of the little dinosaurs, or the large dinosaurs rather, that we've inherited from the industrial model. So this is something to think of. And this is kind of back to Yuri Gromyko. So again, the Soviet model is major based. So we have the math major, the physics major, the philosophy major. So the meta subjects that you're talking about is kind of, is along the same lines as the pathways that we're discussing that are meta subject like, right? They are cut through the majors. So again, it's the new entrepreneurial model where students are agents of their own education, and we're helping them create those agental pathways that they're crafting. So the question that I have, so the entrepreneurial model of education, in my view, is completely mainstream, is where everybody's going, is what everybody is doing. It's not Paul Freire, it's not revolutionary, it's completely where the business is. The new business of higher education is. It's completely capitalist, completely mainstream. So I'm interested in, and I wonder if you have thoughts about it. Shouldn't we look at something beyond the entrepreneurial model, where the beyond lies? And I think this is where real innovation, real revolution is. What's beyond that? Because there are real problems with entrepreneurial models. Like, for example, I'll give you one thing. We're dealing with one downside with the entrepreneurial model that we're all seeing is the extreme levels of anxiety and depression in the student population on campus. They respond to this being made agents, right, of their own education with extreme levels of mental illness, right? So we have to hire more and more counselors to respond to that. This is one of, there are more, but I'll stop here. So what do you see as something beyond the entrepreneurial model? Thank you.
Is it possible to give some remarks about what Alla asked, because it's tremendously important?
I'd like to respond to Alla.
Yeah, of course.
Alla, whose answer will be
Shirley.
more relatable for you?
My question is for everyone, so whoever is inspired to respond, Shirley.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Alla. I appreciate your conversation, and I'm very glad you're in the school you're in, because I feel like you're in another planet compared to the rest of the United States of America. You have painted a wonderful picture of an arts-based school and of a kind of a dream world that doesn't exist in most of the United States. And so I just want people to understand that it's important to understand that we are very close in the United States to a Soviet system and Soviet model, and to the point of looking at how curriculum and how students are treated, even when they make it past high school and get into a university or a college, as they would say in the States, the fact that they are slammed with 5 and 6 courses in a week and spend themselves fixed at a desk studying exactly the same things that their grandfathers and grandmothers studied in university is shocking. The American curriculum has not basically changed in over 100 years. It was, John Dewey was like a dream in people's lives, and John Dewey does not exist in the United States of America. I think arts and music schools, private schools have the ability, or even public arts schools and magnet schools have the ability to teach and encourage freedom, agency, and entrepreneurship. What I have observed also is the word entrepreneurship is very tightly tied to capitalism. And especially right now, I am teaching both in New York and in Canada. And in Canada, what I observe, especially in the West, is the notion of entrepreneurship is directly tied to business and funded most of the time by oil and gas companies and by large conglomerates. That entrepreneurship, when it is taught and encouraged, is, I love entrepreneurship. I think it's a wonderful notion, but it is often tied to the corporate notion of what one can be and what one can have. And so I do think that when we go back to this notion of I can't remember, I do apologize which brilliant speak talked about the third and fourth spaces, but that third space and where we would go after as youth move into a different way of seeing the world, that notion of what we haven't talked about is control. And I believe that control is really as power. I see the notion of how we identify where power is and control is the way that we can make a difference in education. And what we haven't talked about is the incredible intervention, especially in the United States, somewhat in Canada, and in other countries, as to how politicians and governments change and move education and curriculum per election. And that's what we're seeing in the United States and in some places in Canada tremendously, that when you are elected, when a government is elected, then that's when the difference in what is going to happen to the education system. So it's never climbing up to betterment. It's consistently here in battling ideologies of stupidity, in my opinion, and so what happens in ideologies of stupidity is they always fall back on the consistent, expected, known, Tayloristic industrial school model. And that's one of the problems, is we can't get above the ideologies in order to ask the question simply, what can we do to facilitate agency, wellness, and ways of knowing for youth? What can we do? That conversation we never get to because we're so busy with the battling notion of who is in charge and, okay, none of us could figure anything out. Let's go back to Frederick Taylor and create the factory yet again. So I have a very cynical and as a follower of Freiре, I have to admit and out myself, is pedagogy of hope is not very strong for me. because I do not hope that human beings are able to rise above their narcissistic, political, small-mindedness in order to create a better world. And I would say the country that touts itself as the greatest country on earth is probably one of the worst countries on earth to ever claim a good education system. So I'm done.
Yeah. Anna, I would like also to give some remarks after what Shirley said, because it's very important, but somehow answering to what Anna asked, yeah? To Alla asked, yeah?
Yes. Now you can make remarks, and after that we will go to the other questions.
Yeah, but for me, so it's of course not an idea how to change and how to develop American universities. It's not the point, but the point of what is exactly beyond the entrepreneurship model of education. And for my opinion, it's connected exactly with the real design education, which is connected with weak issues. Problems as weak issues, and so it's connected with thinking. When there are possibility to really teach how it's possible together with the students to solve such problems, which are tremendously important for society but not solved before. And it's also, of course, differences of languages. Because when you are saying that there are different activities, for me, it's not exactly activities, because according to my perspective, for example, design activity, it's necessary to introduce different instruments, different organization, but also thinking, design thinking, and such things. And somehow, of course, it's very important that students are active and have different activities. But the problem is how to introduce in the real context of design activity as also productive thought process and possibility to formulate real weak issues and to find a solution for them. And this may be the main problem, because you see from other side, we have two different points. From one side, we have constructivism in knowledge structures, but from other side, there are the same problem of a kind of constructivism of activity systems, not activities in opposition to passivity, yeah? But as cultural forms of norms, of tradition, instruments, and the best examples and realities of such structures. That's all.
Yeah, thank you, Yuri. Okay, now I have a question to our member, Alexander Vladimirovich. You had a question, but after that you clear your raised hand. Maybe you have a question now. Okay, now I propose to get back to our order and start to discuss about project decisions to make a new format of schools or new format of environment. Your thoughts about it, maybe the school of the future. And I think that we start in the previous order, and in your presentation you can add some interesting thoughts. And we had a question to Steve in chat about the comparing of position from dictator for children and the liberty, and it's interesting too. Now, Shirley, maybe you start with your position with the school of the future and the different approach of environment for adolescents. Shirley, yes.
Sorry. What was the second part of that? School of the Future, and what was the other?
I propose to start with our order, and you can add your thoughts about our set and your opinion in the different thoughts of our speakers too. And the question about the new environment and new school for children for formation and agency.
When I think of the school of the future, I kind of laugh in a very sarcastic way because I don't think a lot about the future much anymore. We have now been placed into a minute by minute kind of world, and we need to understand that what we see as future is now very difficult to even conceive. So I do think that it takes us back to a more local level of starting to understand human beings. And I do once again apologize which scholar said what, but the notion of youth being entire human beings, that young people or teenagers are already developed and distinct human beings. And I would like to see that somehow changed. And I would also like to see what Stephen discussed in the Child Rights Act to be expanded, and that there should be teenager or youth rights, in a sense. In so much of my work, I note that how we try for the first 5 or 6, 7 years of children development and pushing them to have as much agency as possible. No human on earth has more agency than a 3-year-old, because all the adults do is run around behind them and support everything they do. So if they stand up, it's hysterical. If they run, it's wonderful. If they poop in the toilet, it is the greatest accomplishment that the family has ever seen. I mean, adults clap and yell and call one another with agency. Give the child agency. And then by the time the child is 8 or 9, maybe 10, probably when their puberty is starting to begin, all of a sudden the adults are taking the agency away. You can't wear makeup. You can't talk that way. Don't say that word. You can't dress that way. You dress the way I tell you. Listen to your teachers. And all of a sudden that agency of 10 years has been destroyed into, now we're going to put you in a jail, and your little prison is going to be from adolescent to when people say you are an adult, which in some countries is 18, other countries it's 21. So we have this numerical obsession with what to place people in. And it isn't until you're past the designed country's adulthood, whatever country says, that they can legally drink, they can legally smoke, they can legally vote, they can legally drive a car, that all of a sudden these very boggled and totally bamboozled human beings are looking around and saying, well, I had the first 10 years of everybody clapping for what I did. The next 8 or 10 years was everybody telling me what I can't do. Now, what am I supposed to do in this world? How am I supposed to make sense of my space in the world? And so it becomes a very, very strange space, because then when people are telling them, post-teenager humans, that they are now adults, then they signify and identify the notion of adulthood with control. Isn't that what adults do? They control. And so they become now mentees of controlling adults, and then they evolve into being controlling adults themselves. So we have tremendous pathologies and psychological disturbances with these human beings, because we've never given a direct message, number one, that you are valuable. You are a valuable human. And whether or not you go to the toilet at 3 years old is not important of value. What is valuable is that you are a happy, healthy, loved human being. And these are messages that we haven't even talked about health, happiness, and love. And yet we're talking about the emergence of agency of children into teenagers. And I find that worrisome, that those words, which are Paulo Freire's words, are not having enough effect, that we are concerned with wellness and happiness and love. And that idea of what we do is I do believe in working with the development of human beings, not developmentalism, but the development of human beings as they move, and understanding, and this is what I think large countries many times don't understand when they mandate education, is that each human being has a different way of seeing the world. And so how do we accommodate and understand that? How do we work toward that? And while I do agree that the fourth space, social media and abilities to communicate, are incredibly innovative and have allowed some people to have platforms and friendships that validate them, what worries me is that there always seems to be controlling adults, unhidden bot-like humans that are controlling the discourse on social media. Like that social media has now been the ultimate demonstrator of lack of responsibility, of social responsibility. And certainly countries have seen that with the advent and intervention of politics and religion within certain venues. So I do worry about that space. So I don't really have an end to what my rant is. Mostly the fact that I feel like we have been failures in a lot of ways from the very beginning. You know, to the 3 month, if my kid isn't rolling over at 3 months, there must be something wrong, to the fact that if a child isn't speaking at 3 years old, we need to go to the therapist, forgetting that Einstein didn't really speak till he was 6. So that idea of developmentalism has destroyed the etymology of our schools, in my opinion. And then that along with it, the Tayloristic Ralph Tyler kind of curricular styles and the Tayloristic schools, which are all just regimented, robotic replications of the industrial era, really do disturb me. But I don't think that conversation is a conversation we can have with young teachers, because they don't have the background on which to understand what philosophy, sociology, and ideology is. So I'm going to just leave that up there as kind of a hanging rant and rave that I've just done.
Thank you. Юрий Громыко.
I would like to say the following. First of all, for me, new school of the future, is connected to possibility to teaching this school design activity and research activity in full volume. I would like also to say that meta subject about which I was speaking, they are not majors. What Alla said, it's very different thing. It's connected with reflexive thinking and possibility to understand what kind of problems through different fields of discipline, not to be one-channeled mind, but through different discipline to understand what kind of problem we can solve, what kind of schemes, signs, and symbols we can use in different fields. And so meta subject is special reflexive instruments to interconnect different fields of design activity, but also of disciplines, because very important problem, how in this chaotic world to teach thinking. And this is the most important position of teacher to do this. So for me, the main problem just now, it's teacher education, because also in Russia we have different projects of schools, but the problem is what must be very different methodology of teacher activity. And for me, teacher in every situation develops, first of all, thinking and thought acts according to attainment age possibilities to foster thinking. Yeah, not determine, but to foster possibility to thinking, but exactly thinking in very chaotic, difficult situation. Second, she must be specialist in game techniques. He could be able to organize meta games with teenagers to understand how is structured social reality and to be in position to make reflection on how organize rules, activism, and different things to change them. And third, he must be specialist in communication techniques, in understanding to integrate around teenagers and their design activities interdisciplinary expert, members of community, parents, people of interest, and so on. And so this interconnection between thinking, development of thinking in direct form and in design activity, also organization of meta games and communication, it could be integrated sphere. But design education must not initiate deschooling and formation of additional education in opposition to secondary school of institution. It's necessary to develop. We must, so why I'm speaking about very new project of school as institution. And it's good to teach teenager consistently, systematically to design and to make project inside the school and outside the school, and so to put plasmapodia in societal milieu, and then to return this plasmapodia back to make reflection and to understand how community is actor in such milieu, and what this community which is around school exactly can achieve. Also, the very important problem that teacher today in secondary school very often is not a lifestyle authority and even knowledge authority for teenager. So it's very important to restore this position, because very often for a child it's clear that school disciplines is disconnected with money and social success. And so teacher leadership among teenagers may be regained only by help very different competences and methodology than only expertise in school subjects. So, for example, he has been able to objectify existing also computer game or social networking and to demonstrate how it's possible in different way to use networking and also different other possibilities. Among such problems, what I am proposing as example, for example, the idea to organize teenager radio broadcasting, as it proposed by my colleague and partner Aidar Fakhrudinov from Kazan, or to organize teenager adult digital design production unit to make project of multi-infrastructure system integrated in digital models together railroads, energy, tidal plants, telecommunication. And this is tremendously important because humanity entered in the age of Aquarius. So transformative objectives are tremendously important, but concept and plots of operation must be compared to with the impact of actions to understand what is achieved, or what are positive results of design. Other way, we have changes for the sake of changes without human values and principles. Such a designing activity without values and principles is dangerous and devastating. So teacher is the key position in design education to support teenager dream, to foster dream, to transform this dream in scheme of action. But from other side, teacher must personally exemplify that design activity is connected with the social responsibility for other people, not only responsibility of herself or himself. And so I would like also to give example, and this is not simply a theory. Exactly just now, when we have this wonderful conference, our institute and my sister, Nina Gромыко, professor of philosophy, is leading the design session in city Krasnouralsk in Ural region with teenagers from secondary schools elaborating the project of the future city, how to improve environment and ecology in the city, how to organize places of social cultural activity. And this is connected with values and principles. Thank you very much for your attention. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, Pavел Lukša said to me that she had a lack of time, and now I pass the word to Pavel.
I also would like to excuse myself. I must quit, unfortunately.
Yes, I know. Thank you, Yuri, for your participation. Pavel?
Yes, thank you. I think it's an exciting discussion, and I feel that part of what we experience here is expressed by this well-known saying by William Gibson, a science fiction writer, who said the future is already here, but it's unevenly distributed. So we are talking about, let's say, a larger system that is still, let's say, pretty much backward looking and replicating the outdated models of that are dominated by child oppression, let's say. But we also are discussing the transition to entrepreneurial schools and universities, and example of meta games that Yuri Gромыko was giving. So I think we are at a point where there are already a lot of beautiful and, let's say, potentially very powerful green shoots of that possible new educational paradigm that are present here. But the question is, how do we amplify them? How do we, so to say, grow them into a new system that would be based on a different principle, the principle of human agency that is considered as a natural trait, continuing from the, let's say, basically the beginning of our learning cycle towards the very end of this learning cycle, which ends with basically with our life. And something that was mentioned here, the idea of learner agency. I'm thinking about, okay, every child at the age of, let's say, 6 months or 1 year or 2 years doesn't require validation from adults to learn language, to learn culture. And the child, so to say, soaks in all kinds of knowledge from the environment without any additional, let's say, empowerment to do so. And that means that naturally we are empowered, and we are this is our natural trait, to be active learners. Entrepreneurship, we were talking about the entrepreneurship, something that helps us develop the agency. I'm sometimes asking people, how do you think, do you think the percentage of entrepreneurs in the human population? And some people say it's 2, 3, 5% of the adult population. But if we think about children at the age of 5, I claim that almost 100% are natural entrepreneurs, because any child can organize a game and engage other children in the game. And that's basically the essence of entrepreneurship, is to create a project and engage others, to inspire them in your project. So it means that we have those natural traits, but they are, so to say, suppressed. We are unlearning them, or we are learning something that blocks this potential within us as we go into the educational system. So the question begins, the question that we should ask is not how do we kind of establish like a new layer on top of the system, but how do we reorganize the system to really help us cultivate this naturally innate ability rather than to lose it as we go into older age. And I think there's so many things that were already mentioned that really help us. If we, for example, make entrepreneurial curriculum something that goes through the whole, for example, cycle of the school and into university to help young people become organizers, activists, entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs. This is one possible pathway. To become researchers, to become explorers, to become learning expeditions is a very, very, very beautiful concept that I think is really empowering a lot of young learners to become more active in the society. I just wanted to underscore something that I think is missing from our discussion, that I would like to add as one more component that's frequently missing, because we are thinking about the learner agency from the, let's say, more conceptual, more like cognitive, let's say, aspect. And very nice, very interesting discovery was made by the School of Self-Determination in Russia. That is by Alexander Tubelsky and his colleagues. They discovered that actually a learner agency can be cultivated by body practices. So they really created a set of physical exercises that help you discover how in the physical space a young child can move and make decisions. Like they created 3-dimensional mazes for children of age 5 to 7 to 8 that they can crawl through, and really with every movement they have to make a choice. So they cultivate this agency on the level of embodiment with their bodies. So I think we can talk about all these nice, let's say, socially situated approaches, which are really necessary, but I think we really need to think also about the role of physical development in the cultivation of the agency and learner agency. And that is what I think we really need to include in our conversation. And of course, everything that has been said so far, I feel there's a beautiful pattern of different approaches. And maybe last thing that I wanted to say is that in Global Education Futures, we hold this idea of really creating a research dedicated to learner agency, where we wanted to map out the key methods that exist out there in the world that deal with learner agency. And I would like to invite you colleagues who participate in the panel today to connect and really work on this project together, because I think it's really needed right now. It's the moment when this knowledge has to go into the world, has to be made widely known. Thank you.
Thank you, Pavel, and thank you for your invitation. Now let's go to Steve Дженнаро. And Steve, you had a question in chat. You saw it?
Okay, yes. I'll come to the question in just a moment, but first I want to just speak to the larger topic right now that the rest of the panel is speaking to, if that's okay. And what I want to say is, social change doesn't happen with one big action. It's not one big action and then the world changes. Social change happens with many small actions by many individuals, one step at a time. And entrepreneurship model that's being discussed here, I think, is an example of the positive possibilities for social change in education. Because when we give young people the opportunity to participate in really what is the means of production, okay, and we give them the opportunity to have control in spaces which they often are not given control, those are empowering actions towards social change. Two things here. First, I mean, our history our history, especially the way we tell history through this, patriarchal, capitalist lens, suggests that one individual comes along, usually a man, usually a white man, and then he does one single thing and the whole world is changed for the better. But what we realize is in all of these social movements, there are hundreds of unseen actors, usually women and children, whose actions and small everyday actions are what make the movement happen. When we discuss issues around participation and agency, Shirley said so well before, what we're not talking about, what we should be talking about is discussions around power and notions of power and construction of power. And so when we take on an entrepreneurship model, when we encourage young people in education to see themselves as entrepreneurs, and we give them the opportunity to participate in these types of tasks, what we are saying to them is, you can challenge the existing structures of capitalism, patriarchy, and misogyny that go along with that, white supremacy, heteronormativity, all of that, by saying that there are other opportunities that exist than those that are prescribed to you. And so these alternative models of education, which are empowering on the small scale, are actually empowering on the large scale. So in the last round of discussion, there was it was noted that in the practical sense, this idea of agency in entrepreneurship isn't political. I'm saying actually it's very political in the most empowering and positive ways. When we encourage young people to see themselves as being as having the opportunity to own the means of production, to produce their own ideas, to produce their own media, to produce their own realities, to produce their own futures, to name the word in the world, as Paulo Freire would say, what we are doing is we are participating in transformative education, problem-posing education, seeing the world as a problem and questions to be asked to that problem, rather than seeing it as a bunch of knowledge to be disseminated into individuals. So this entrepreneurship model, I think, has real positive potential. When I think philosophically about education, I think the notion that education historically has a couple key roles to play in the lives of young people. First off, there is a socializing role. So it needs to young people have to occupy space. School provides that space for them, and it gives to them a sense of social norms and expectations. This is generally geographically specific. Okay, so how to fit into the world that's around them. The second role, though, is a vocational role. School needs to provide vocational training for the workplace, whatever the workplace is going to look like for when they come out of school. So school has to have a vocational component to it. And, certainly in the industrial model, it's different from what the school of the future is going to look like. But current curriculum changes here in Ontario, where I live in Canada, are trying to speak to this. They're trying to speak to this by bringing coding, for example, into the regular curriculum. And I've been arguing for almost 7 years now that coding in our state should be being taught in kindergarten, in preschool to our young people, right? Because it is a language of the future. So the importance is in vocational training. So social training, yes, there's a role there. Vocational training, so the school of the future has to always meet both of those expectations, the social expectation of education and the vocational expectation. And again, looking at today's curriculum in the province of Ontario, in the state that I live in the country of Canada, there's now a focus on STEM education: science, technology, engineering, mathematics. And the reason why is this is the vocational component. Even more so, there's an emphasis on degendering STEM education, so we get more girls and more women into this field, and even more so in creating equity in the area of STEM. I'll give you an example. UNESCO in March of 2021 noted that currently, over 80% of all AI jobs globally are occupied by white men. So the problem with this is, and the reason why we need to degender these types of this area of education so that we have more women and more women of color in these spaces, is because artificial intelligence is predictive of experiences of individuals and then gives those predictive experiences as the natural environment for whatever it's whatever code it's creating. But if the experiences that it's predicting are based on only the experiences of white men, then that's only the experience that it's going to predict going forward. So there's an emphasis now in both the social and the vocational components of education for the future to be recognizing technology, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. Coding is important to this, but also degendering, okay, and also decoloring or de-ethnicizing the experiences of the programmers and the people who are participating in this. Entrepreneurship can play a very important role in this. But lastly, and for me, what I think to be the most important, although they're all overlapping and equally important, is that, again, Shirley mentioned John Dewey, right? For John Dewey, education has a democratic component. Right, there's a citizenship component to education, and that our education system needs to play a role in citizenship training for all of us if we're going to live in a just and democratic society. And so the school of the future should be also recognizing the importance of the citizenship component. An agency here, this notion of the formation of agency, again, politicized, is connected to citizenship. So this is where I would answer the question before. How do we best practices to change adult mindsets concerning children's rights from the position they belong to me and what I tell them to how they have their own right to decide? Well, in that citizenship component of education, that one I just mentioned there, here's an opportunity for this. First of all, the Convention on the Rights of the Child should be taught in every school to every child around the globe. But when my students come to Child and Youth Studies in first year university, and I ask them how many have heard of the UNCRC, even though it's been around since 1989, even though Canada helped to draft it, and Canada was the first country to ratify it, to sign and ratify it, my students have never heard of it. So part of it is about teaching in the school system from the youngest age that these rights exist, fundamental human rights, okay? And then the second component is, what if we tied the lived experiences, again, this ladder of participation, to the rights of young people, to the education system, to citizenship training, to social justice issues, okay, and to vocational training? What if we lowered the voting age so that young people could participate in their political systems as active agents in the decision-making process, so they get to help to elect their governments, so they have stake in the game, so their voice actually matters, so that politicians, when they speak about young people, have to be held accountable to the young people who they are speaking about. If we lowered the voting age, we could tie curriculum through elementary school, middle school, high school, right? We could tie the curriculum to citizenship training as well, and allow young people to participate earlier in the formation of their government. The future of education, so we have home space, secondary space, schooling, third space outside of it. Yes, outside in the third spaces, a lot of things happen, but education can also be a primary space for social change if we decide to engage in it in that way. We know historically that young people vote, at least in the West and in Canada. We have over 2 decades of data now to demonstrate this. If given the opportunity to vote, young people vote in different directions from their parents or from their grandparents. We have what we call mock elections. And what this means is, when there's an election at the federal level, when we elect our prime minister in Canada, many schools across the country host elections as well, where the students vote on who they want to. And the curriculum goes through, what each party stands for, what the platform looks like, what they're promising, and then they track these elections. What we have found historically in Canada across the last 2 decades is that Canadian adults over the age of majority tend to vote in favor of right of center parties based around economic policy to protect their own economic interests. What we have found with young people is that when they tend to vote in these mock elections, they vote around policy that is informed by the core issues that they have identified as mattering to them: climate change, the environment, food scarcity, gender inequality, racial inequality, and so forth. And so they tend to vote with parties not based on their own economic interest, but based on the social good. The future, school of the future has an opportunity to tie into all of these phases: the civic component of citizenship, the vocational component of mastering the science and technology of the future workforce, and the social component of understanding the social norms, being able to challenge those and speak back when there is injustice. And hopefully, if we are going to participate in this type of discussion to help shape what that future school looks like and looks forward and will be, we will also include young people in those discussions going forward as well. Since, again, we always want to have them using a rights-based approach involved in all of the discussions when the outcomes of those discussions directly impact their lives. Thanks.
Thank you. It was really very energetic. Thank you very much. And now the last speaker, Anдрей Андрусов, and after that we can repeat the part of questions.
Yes, thank you. Talking about School of Future, I think the most important thing is the goal of this school, because as of today, we have talked today a lot about this industrial type of the school, and it comes from the goal why it was created, what for it was created, and I would refer to like small book by Mark Prensky. You've probably heard of him. He said that the world needs new curriculum, and the basis of this curriculum is not about what kids should, like people should learn, but what they should become. Like they should become like good, active citizens, basically, something like that. And if, but this change of goal will need to change all this motivation of principals of all the school system, actually, of teachers, and this requires a lot of change. But this is sort of a dream how this should be. It is very difficult to get from point A, where we are, to this point B in the future, where the school will have the right goals, and then how to, within these goals, if this is the goal, and sometimes, as I said, in certain schools, the principal sets these goals for himself because they say, no, I cannot live otherwise. I mean, this should be this way. And they create this environment to change the goal of the system inside the school or system inside the class, which help kids become more, behave as agents. And yes, the instruments, we have talked about this. I do believe in entrepreneurship, design activity, project-based learning, research, etc. I mean, these instruments, I think they have been described a lot. The question is, who are the teachers that will come to, who will be able to lead these activities in the proper way, so that to have this rapport with students. My idea is that today schools don't, I mean, at least we're talking about general schools. We don't have this solution to make this change in general schools. So there are few schools that do follow this path and already create the environment required for agency development. But if the schools don't go there, the third places will go there. This is why Kruzhok movement is developing right now, because the schools don't respond to this request. This is absolutely, this is a request from the market, from people, from parents, from the industry, and the schools, they are not able to respond to this request. And if they don't do it, then something else appears, like a Kruzhok movement that should fill this gap. It can be the movement of this small activities. It can be something else, I don't know, political movement or something else that will close this gap. But this will happen. So that's just another way. And I don't, well, maybe this is it's sort of revolutionary way, which I don't think is very like constructive. It can, as we know, revolutions, they don't achieve the right goals, at least in the short run. So I hope there will be a way to make the schools, to change the schools dramatically, systemically change the schools. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Andrei, thank you. Okay, now we have a time for questions and your opinions and the answer to the presentation of our speakers. Maybe somebody raise a hand from our participants of the round table, from the viewers. Alexei, Andrei, maybe you have questions?
I have actually I have a point, and maybe it's time to share it with you. Do not wait for the end of this discussion. Actually, thank you very much for this fruitful and inspiring discussion, because as a people of practice, it's really a significant possibility to listen different points of view and interesting questions on this complicated topic. I want to share my feeling and my understanding on this topic, and listening all the speakers, I think that we live in the world of adults. We can think anything about rights of children and new school models, but we live in the world of conceptions of adults. We live in the world of institutions built and guided by adults. So this is the situation we have. And when we talk about agency of children and young people, it's very significant thing to world of adults for them. What's the world of adults they build and will build? And if we look at the historical examples like Soviet Revolution or other probably revolutions and fast processes of change in other countries, we see that the young people are the people who taking responsibility for the world, I think, because we see how young people included in the building new world of Soviet country, and I'm sure that we can find such examples in other countries. We can see the same for women and for people who are not white and have no rights. We see how this energy of possibility can change the world. But for such process, we need the vanguard, someone who guide these young people, someone who show the new models, or someone who build and experiments, make experiments with new models together with young people. And I think that this is the key answer on the question Alla asked about the new model of post-entrepreneur school. I think that the model of individual entrepreneurship is the model when you cannot build the new system. you can just only be the part of the existing system this way. And that's why we need the ways and the construction yards and some places of experiments, makers, communities, or community schools, the community as a way of joining different people of different age and different way of thinking, but the union which has the same goals and the same values. Communal entrepreneurship, not individual entrepreneurship, but communal entrepreneurship of creating sustainable communities is the main thing after the modern capitalist individual entrepreneurship we have as a primary model for most of the young people. And I think that this is a topic to discuss on the international level. What are the practices and theories for building these communal entrepreneurship spaces and protopias, how Pavел Lukša called it, or other terms, how to name it. And we are trying to build it from the grassroots, but I think that we need a sort of network here to make it sustainable and make it a world maker, world changer. Yes, thank you very much. It was a sort of comment, not the question actually. So it would be interesting to hear some feedback.
Okay, maybe somebody of speakers can answer something to Alexei, maybe some ideas about collectional, about collective entrepreneurship. Alla, what do you think about this conception?
I'm not an expert, and I don't want to hijack the discussion, but you know, when I was listening to the last few responses, you know, I really like, you know, what is emerging, and I've been writing down a few. So, for example, the idea that agency. So I'm just going to repeat a few. The idea that agency, a reminder that, you know, I kind of offer the critique of agency. Agency can be really political and shouldn't be discarded as just the way we kind of, the way we talk about it, the way we frame it. And not as a kind of as an entrepreneur within the system, but as a person, is a powerful motive. And I think it motivates us as educators when we establish a relationship of teacher-student. We really want to help them become somebody. And I love the idea of makers communities, and the way my mind went immediately, sort of cooperative communities, right? That can't exist in but they can't exist in isolation, right? We need they need a network, and sort of historically, it's been really difficult for them to survive in a larger kind of capitalist system, and they need alternative systems of financing. So immediately my mind went there, sort of to those historical examples. And I don't know if that's what you meant, but I love the idea, kind of makers communities as with their systems of values as an alternative to individual entrepreneurs who can only kind of function within the already existing system and can never transform the world. Like, I just find that kind of that statement powerful, and I think it just like we should always remember that. So thank you for those ideas.
Thank you. Shirli, what do you think about it?
I have these stupid earphones and they're not working very well. Well, clearly I thought a lot about it because I've written about 10 pages in the last 20 minutes. And Alla, I agree with you, the difference of duty as opposed to something which is individual, like entrepreneurship. So it's not that there's a problem with what is taught in entrepreneurship, but it's a different approach and the way of approaching community from local to national to global levels is, I think, I agree with you 100%. You know what? I feel like what we've been talking about this whole time is what kids, what we need to facilitate for kids to know to survive and flourish in the universe. So when I say kids, I guess I mean from every age up, but what can we do to change our ways of being and knowing in order to be the boost up for kids to go as far as they can go and be able to thrive and be safe? And I think that, and I do think that what is taught in school, which is now, now called curriculum, the word, which I think comes from the Greek or the Latin of driving a horse. So figure that one out. But the idea of how can we facilitate the creation of a critical, power identifying, suitable, tentative way of being. And that's, I think, probably where our creators all over the world who created educational systems never conceived of the notion of tentativity, that what works today, we must always know may not work tomorrow. And I think that's, so I think I'm talking about a philosophical and positional, a positional and philosophical change. That's kind of where I am. And I don't think this is really brilliant, but I don't think it's enough. We need to do this again. And I think selecting North America and Russian conversations could be really significant in educational change.
Yes, I think so. And it looks like our system have the same problems. Yes, and okay. If we have questions, it's time to ask it. Or we can go to the closing of the round table. Okay. Okay. Thank you all of you for today, and I think that it was really very inspiring and powerful discussion. And today we discuss about many questions, many parts of the term of agency, and not in the all cases your positions was the same, and it's okay, it's normal, and it's a good base for further negotiation and for further dialogue. I think that we will make some articles and schematization of this conversation, and it's maybe it will be an article to our journals, and maybe you can publish in the America or Canada. It's maybe interesting too, I think. And now I pass the word of the president of Кружок Movement, Alexei Fedosеев, and we will close our today's meeting.
Well, actually, I already said the thing I wanted to share with you, but so that I just want to say thank you very much. It was a great talk, and it was there were so many thoughts to discuss in the future in our group and in international level. It was the first example for us of such a big round table and so representative. So I hope that this experience will be interesting for all of our participants and for all of you, and we will be glad to continue it somehow on the conferences, on separate events, and it's a very significant talk to continue, I think. Thank you very much. It was great to be with you today. Thank you.
I think that we can discuss the date of the next roundtable in the spring. Yes, and we can continue our discussion because it's yesterday we had a conversation with Steve about the social media and yes, and it's another dialogue, and it's another big field of different opinions and different ways in this field too. And okay, we have the recording of our today conversation in YouTube, and if you need some contacts of speakers or viewers and participants, you can send me a letter and I send you all you need. Thank you very much. Goodbye. Have a good evening in Moscow and a good day in Canada. Bye.